In this episode, we're talking about another thrift store find for the PC called Wetlands. Wetlands is an on-rails full-motion video shooter made by Hypnotics. They're best known for their Outlaw series of sports titles and the Deer Avengers series. This game, however, predates both those series as it was released in 1995. I think it's safe to say that after looking at their resume, Wetlands was easily Hypnotics' best game. It reminds me a lot of games from the 3DO era. I noticed on the packaging that the 3DO company is mentioned, so I did a little investigation. And while information about this game is very sparse on the internet, I was able to figure out that the publisher of this game, New World Computing, was purchased by 3DO around the same time as Wetlands' release. That said, Wetlands is a PC exclusive and did not appear on the 3DO system, despite being released right around the 3DO's best year and featuring gameplay that would have probably fit well on the system. Anyway, Wetlands is, as I mentioned, an on-rails shooter similar to games like Sewer Shark or Star Fox. It uses pre-rendered video backdrops with hand-drawn and 3D rendered enemies on top of the video. However, unlike Star Fox, you do not control your ship directly in the game. Instead, you simply point at things and fire. It's a simple concept that's been done many times, but this game stands out by having excellent presentation. Before and after every level are lengthy and beautifully animated cutscenes that help set the mood and also give you motivation to make it through the levels. There are also some slick-looking scenes in the game that use some fairly advanced 3D for the time that help break up the shoot gameplay. Overall, these are the main draw for me. The shooting is fine using the mouse, and the levels are pretty good looking in general, but the gameplay itself is repetitive and would be really boring if it wasn't broken up so frequently by the excellent cinematics. Now, whether or not that's good enough for you to want to play this game is another question entirely. I think this is one of the few instances when I'd say that watching a playthrough of this game is as enjoyable or maybe more so than actually playing it. It's not that the game's bad, it's just that the game's about 50% gameplay and 50% cinematics, and honestly, there's a good reason for that. The gameplay without the cinematics would be boring in about 10 minutes. Watching someone blow through the gameplay and then allow you to enjoy the animations seems like it might be preferable to trial and erroring your way through some of the tougher stages. And speaking of tough stages, somewhere around the third part of the third stage is a section that is ridiculous and unplayable with the mouse. Rather than its usual first-person perspective, the game tries some top-down action with disastrous results. I must have spent over an hour trying to beat this section that should honestly take no more than a minute to complete, but the controls are so awful in this part that I nearly gave up on the game entirely because of it. In fact, if I wasn't reviewing this game, I'm sure I would have stopped there. Eventually, I was forced to switch over to the joystick controls for this one section and was able to pass it after many tries, but just barely, and it was still a terrible mess even with the joystick. I appreciate the attempt at mixing things up, but if it's going to be that poorly executed, then they might as well just forget it. The rest of the in-flight controls are pretty simple, but work well. I never had a hard time determining what to shoot, and the game gives you excellent instructions before each mission, so you know exactly what to do. The story is also quite good for the time, and the Blade Runner meets Waterworld premise is an interesting one. The animation is strong, and the voice acting is also very good. The music, on the other hand, is repetitive. Most of the tracks are less than 20 seconds and just loop. On the plus side, the game is full of action, and it's surprisingly violent for the era, so those are both pluses in the shooter genre. However, if I have one major gripe, it's that the majority of the levels take place in a very similar looking underwater stage. To be fair, it's part of the story that the entire world is submerged, but I feel like the underwater sections could have used a little more variety in both enemy types and just artistically in general. Lastly, I want to leave you with a little warning. If you get motion sick, I imagine this game would definitely be one to stay away from. The backgrounds twist and turn almost non-stop in some levels, and while I personally don't suffer from motion sickness, I could see this being a really hard game to play if you do. Just a heads up. So, what's the final verdict? Well, it's strange. I enjoyed it, but I have an irrational love for games that remind me of the 3DO, and I'm aware of that. I'm also aware that this is not a common problem among gamers, and so I find it hard to recommend this game based solely on its gameplay. I would recommend it for the interesting animation and story, but I feel like you'd have a much easier and maybe more enjoyable time watching those parts on YouTube somewhere. It's an interesting experiment and a decent package overall, but unfortunately I don't feel the gameplay is robust enough to recommend to everyone. However, if you love FMV games or want to see some great animation in a game from the 1995 era with an interesting story, then Wetlands is an excellent choice for the select few of you that fall into that category. Thanks for watching!